Dream, search, drive. Cars.co.za. Hello and welcome back to the Cars.co.za podcast studio. My name is Ciro De Siena, and today I am delighted to be joined by Winstone Jordaan, the Managing Director of GridCars South Africa. Thank you so much for coming down.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. It's a real privilege to be here and have a chat to you in person again. After the meeting we had with the hill climb. So.
Yes, I'm so glad that you've taken the time to come and sit with us, because of all the people I've met in this electrification journey of South Africa, and I'm not just trying to blow smoke here, but I think you might be the most knowledgeable about the current situation and about where we're heading. Yeah, no, I really appreciate your insight. I'm very much looking forward to picking your brain. So for some more context, Winston and I met. We've been dealing with each other for a long time over the phone, but we met in person at Neisner when I raced the I4. So thank you for your support there. That was a good weekend.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amazing to see the vehicles, and I think it's going to be a good staging ground for the future of positioning electric vehicles, just showing what they're capable of doing.
Yeah. Do you know how funny it was? Because you know how fast that thing was off the line, right? And I had a bunch of people come to me, especially some older gentlemen, and they wanted me to prove that this thing was electric. So I would open the fuel filler flap, and then you'd see the plug points, and then and they would take photos and they'd send to their friends because their friends didn't believe it was electric. It was a good trip.
Yeah, one of the fun ones is always to open the bonnet, but I think with some of the later BMWs, you can't open the bonnet. And with the iX, there's no opening. So now that people say, well, but I can't see, there's no engine. So
Yeah. So the i4 you can open.
Okay.
Then there's a big sort of plastic cover underneath which just pops off. And I actually regret not opening it up at Samola. I think we would have had a crowd around that car, because you just look in the bonnet, in the engine bay, and it's just unlike anything you've ever seen. So no, it was a really good weekend. But we're not here to chat about Samola as much as we'd love to, I'm sure. I am really looking forward to bringing this chat to our audience, because Winstone and GridCars are essentially responsible for electrifying South Africa, really, in a motoring sense. So correct me if I'm wrong, but all of the charging stations around South Africa, the public ones, are your work.
So there's certainly other players in the market. It's not just us. There's, BMW has put a lot down at their dealerships. Audi's done units at their dealerships. There are a couple of smaller network operators doing mostly ACs. If you look at the DC chargers in public locations on the highways, not at automotive dealers and things, then yes, right now we are the dominant player in that space.
So DC charger being a fast charger.
Fast chargers, yeah. And from that perspective, we looked and said, we're not trying to put chargers in popular locations. We're trying to empower EV drivers. So we had to look at coverage more so than density of chargers. So we looked and said, well, let's take the N1 and do a charger every 200 kilometers. And then we took the N2 and the N3 and the N4, and, you can guess which one we try next. So. But so the idea is to sort of empower a highway, because then people can drive places with them. And yes, Lanesburg might not be popular, but if you don't have Lanesburg, you don't have a highway.
Yeah.
There's no way to drive that route. So and that was really, I think, where our focus came, is let's get people moving. Let's get them driving across the country. Let's take away this discussion that says, what if I want to go to Cape Town? Well, go to Cape Town. Because that's always the first question you get with people.
Yes.
What if I want to go to Cape Town?
Yes, that and ESCOM.
I think that we should leave to the end of the discussion.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. No, but you're 100% right. I mean, I used to do, for many, many years, I did a live Q&A session on Cape Talk Radio. And over the years, obviously, electric cars started coming up more and more. And there's always this question of, yes, but you can't road trip in an electric car. Yep. And road tripping is, I suppose, an important thing to South Africans. We live in quite a big country. If you want to get your family around to a holiday destination, it's probably cheaper to drive than to buy 4 plane tickets or whatever the case may be. So we like road tripping. We like towing our caravans, etc., etc. And I'm quite happy to say that I now have an electric vehicle road trip under my belt.
That was from Neisner back to Cape Town.
Yeah, so exactly. So BMW asked us, can you please take this i4 back to Cape Town? So myself and Ditzer actually was sitting there behind the cameras. We did Neisner to Cape Town, and it was a remarkably smooth process, a remarkably smooth endeavor, shall we say.
Because we started off by saying we've got to do a road trip, but by the way, we've got no cars, no card.
Yes, no card.
Registration.
Not my fault.
So we did have to pull a rabbit out of the hat there.
Yes, thank you.
Get that working. But but absolutely.
Winston and his magicians actually made my Simola driver's tag work on the GridCars machines, which was brilliant. So anyway, we got to Cape Town problem free. But this is what I wanted to discuss with you, because I think this is where where I think our viewers will get a lot of value out of our chat, is my experience of road tripping was it's very smooth. There's enough charges, no doubt in my mind. There's enough charges to do at least what we did, Knysna to Cape Town, so I can definitely vouch for that. But it's quite different to road tripping in a traditionally powered car. It requires a fair bit of patience and a lot of maths.
Definitely.
I felt like I was back in sort of standard 8, like back of the maths class. If you have a car which has a 86 kilowatt hour battery and you need to get 500 kilometers, so I mean, what would your what's your feeling on road tripping at the moment? What would your advice be for South Africans?
So, well, I think firstly, just jump in and do it. It's not difficult. And as you say, there is a bit of maths, but I think it's more the maths is a choice. Most people can look and say, I know what the range of my vehicle is. I know the next charger is within that range. I just drive. Okay. Certainly, once you get a little bit more comfortable with that and you start looking and saying, okay, but wait a minute, I could skip the next charger because I've got enough to get to one after that. Mm. So I typically say to people, electric vehicles is about charging every chance you get. Whenever you stop their charge, even if it's only 10 minutes. So don't miss an opportunity to charge for a few reasons. One, the next charger you get to might be busy, might be somebody there. And whereas if you've made that charge, then you can choose to skip it based on a real reason. There's a reason why I'm skipping this charger. As you get more comfortable with it, then you would start looking. I enjoy the fact that when I drove back, because I drove from Simola all the way back to Johannesburg, and
in the IX.
In the IX.
Oh, nice.
And what we were driving, we were looking as well and saying, okay, do we need to stop here? Or wait, the next one is a bit quicker. It's a faster charger. Let's skip this one because it'll save us more time. Other calculations you'll do is you'll stop at a charge and say, I'm at 80% now. And once you get past 80%, the speed starts to tap down a little bit. So it starts slowing down the charge. And you might then look and say, okay, but I don't need the thing. I'd rather spend more time at the next stop where the battery will be lower and it'll charge faster. It won't be on the slow portion. So you start doing those sort of calculations in your head. But it's not that you have to know how to do it or you have to do it from the beginning. Generally, people would just look and say, my car's got a 300 kilometer range, 200 kilometers to the next charger. I'm good. I'm driving. And you'd be fine on that.
So, you know what it actually made me think of in a sort of ironic way? When we used to road trip as kids, my dad would make us patkos, which, because we were an Italian household, was a fried spaghetti pizza, right? It sounds weird, but it's delicious. You put spaghetti in a pan, lots of cheese, lots of salt, absolutely great. Great road trip food. And driving in a car from the future, an electric car, made me feel like road tripping from the past, because you've got a couple more opportunities to actually sit and kind of like digest the trip and digest your patkos. And that's why, and another thing it made me think of, I think that because we've all grown up with such a remarkable fossil fuel infrastructure all around us, which has taken the better part of a century to develop, we just take it for granted that there's just always going to be fuel around. Yeah. And that network, that's taken trillions of rands and dollars around the world to build up this fossil fuel network, this fossil fuel delivery network and storage network. And to compare it to the electricity network right now, the availability of fast chargers, I think is actually quite unfair. We're in the real infant stages of electrifying our national roads.
Yeah. Look, we without any doubt, we've really just got to this. We're just touching the thing now to see where it's going to go. There's so many players that we are seeing that are starting to enter in that space, that are looking to build their networks, and that's what we spent a lot of time developing this network, probably to develop the experience that I can say, if somebody wants to develop a network, I can say, I can support you on this because I understand what it takes. I know where the complications are. We know what the tools and the services are that you need, and we can provide those for you and help you to take that through. So a big part of it is that we're well positioned now as a country. And I think we've got a great framework to build on. So, I said to you earlier, when you look at the N1, every 200 kilometers is a charger. Over time, people will start splitting the difference, and you'll get every 100 kilometers, then it'll be every 50, and then there'll be 2 at every 50-kilometer location.
Yeah.
And you'll get more and more choice.
Yeah.
And it'll because the electricity is the same wherever you get it, it's going to come down to how quickly can it be delivered, what other services are at that site. Is there things to do in the half an hour, the hour that we're spending at that site? For December, we came down to Sedgefield and drove down with an electric vehicle. Because we're driving an electric vehicle, we had a clear strategy that said this is where we're charging, and we'll be stopping there for an hour, and we'll do this. So the first stop was going to be, we'll have breakfast. The next stop was, it was a casino. So we said, we'll pop into the casino quickly and see. It turned out that when we got there, we weren't registered. So we spent the 45 minutes registering. And once we were registered, the car was full. So I didn't even get to go into the casino on the way down. But the idea was that most of the time, because we had an intent to do something, the car was ready before we were. So we were often, I was saying, car's ready, we have to go. And people said, but we're still busy. We're not done with the stop yet. And I think that to me is what is exciting, is that it does mean you're going to plan better, you're going to be more relaxed. I think it's a much more pleasant trip as opposed to just drive, fill up, drive.
No,
You've
fair
got
enough. Yeah,
more time.
I mean, we stopped at the Riversdale Engine. And we were hungry, so we stopped at a Wimpy Burger, one of my favorite things to do on a road trip, have a Wimpy Burger. Reminds me of being a kid. And yeah, I mean, we sat there, we were like, oh, we've been here for 40 minutes. You don't even really realize the time has passed, assuming there's something to do, which because they'll be in service stations, there generally will be. Yeah. For clarity for our audience, for a long time, the DC chargers have been branded Jaguar. Now, as I understand it, those chargers are not owned by Jaguar; they're branded by Jaguar.
That's correct. Yeah. So it's just the charger is the hardware that's managed separately. It works with all vehicles, so anybody can charge on those. But the branding is then typically negotiated separately. So yes, the first big branding partner in this country was certainly Jaguar. I think Jaguar certainly opened up that market and did the industry a favor by backing it and putting a lot of PR and media behind that people were aware of the highway. There's going to be a new branding partner joining us soon, and I can't let the cat out of the bag yet.
But Audi's public, right? I mean, that's public Audi's knowledge.
Audi did their own. They did separate charges from what the original Jaguar ones were. So it wasn't a case of Audi just rebranded the old Jaguar ones. They actually did new sites. So the 33 sites that are going in, still a few to conclude 100%, but they'll all be in by the end of this month.
Wow.
And the idea is that's trying to get a little bit further into destinations. So we've done cool places like Hermanus, and where you're going to be able to go out to destinations now. And I think that was a brilliant move on Audi's part to look and say we're not just going to brand existing ones. Let's expand. And I think for the OEMs, that's strategic. The idea is that they need to be contributing to help to open this up. But in the long term, that's not what they're going to do. In the long term, they sell cars, and their job is to sell cars. It's other entities that will be building those networks and growing that. So,
and Audi also, quite excitingly, is putting in 150 kilowatt chargers. So those are really cool. Yeah,
we did 4 of those. So basically 1 on each highway. So 1 on the N2, 1 on the N1, 1 on the N3, and 1 on the N4.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but for our audience, the maths would be, assuming the charger is running at full 150 kilowatts, if you want 50 kilowatts in your car to take it to full, or whatever the case may be, that takes a third of an hour. So that's 20 minutes.
Your maths is perfect.
Okay.
However, there are multiple constraints within the systems. Okay, so you've got to look and say, and stop me if it's way out of line for a technical discussion.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, the 150 is the one number. So can your car hit 150? Because maybe your car can only do 100, or maybe it can only do 50. So then that's a limit. The second thing is the connector on the vehicle will have an amp rating. So now it depends on how many amps are flowing, which is dependent on the voltage. So you're always, kilowatts is volts times amps. So if you've got a lower voltage, you need a much higher amps to reach the same kilowatts. So then you start to get to the limitations of the connectors. So the connectors on the 150s are 200 amps, just to give you an idea. We are going to look, we've got a new one now that we can bring in that's a water-cooled connector. So it's got water flowing through the connector.
Wow.
And that'll get us up to about 500 amps.
Sure.
So now if I've got a 200 amp limit and the vehicle can say do 400 volts, then it's 400 volts times 200 amps, 80 kilowatts maximum.
Okay.
Whereas if the vehicle has got an 800 volt battery, and you've got a 200 amp limit, 160 kilowatts.
Okay.
You understand? So there's many limits that come into ultimately doing it. So it's not easy to just say, yeah, it's 150, you'll charge it 150.
Okay.
Generally, the guys on the cars learn very quickly. You know, within a few weeks of buying the car, you'll learn those quick calculations. And you'll know at these types of charges, even though they're capable of 150, I'll only hit 90 or I'll only hit 120 with my car. So the 150s in South Africa, the Audi GT and the Porsche Taycan can both hit the 150 without a problem.
Okay.
All the other cars get sort of to about between 90 and 110.
The iX, out of interest?
So the iX 90.
90.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then if it's an i3, then it's only 50, because then the car's limit, which is a 50 kilowatt charging limit, then kicks in.
Okay.
So then you only get to 50 anyway on the 150s.
And it's self-regulating, right? So if I put too much, a powerful one in, the car sorts itself out. Okay.
And if you look at the one that you stopped at Mossel Bay, so the DC unit there has got a DC on both sides of the thing. So what will happen now is, let's say 2 cars plug in that are capable of 150. It'll just share the charge between them.
Okay.
If the one car starts getting full, remember, it taps down. So now it drops down to only 40 kilowatts instead of the 150. Then the other car can pick up the rest of the power that's available.
Okay.
So we're able to split the power between those two intelligently. In the bigger sites, like when we work with logistics companies, we could have 8 trucks plugged in, and we could be balancing it between those trucks. One truck can get a priority because it's got to leave earlier. So there's some really clever stuff we can do in the background, just sharing the power amongst the vehicles that are connected.
Maths. Told you earlier it was maths.
Yeah. In this case, mostly Excel.
So, I mean, I think one of the things I wanted to discuss with you was from my experience, right? So we stopped in Riversdale, and then I did that calculation you showed me, volts times amps, and we were running at 49, which was cool. Then when we got to Caledon, we plugged in and I did the calculation and we were running at 24.
Correct.
So is that because the charger and the petrol station itself are competing for the power supply, right?
Spot on.
Yeah.
So now, and that's an interesting one. So let's say a little admission from our side. So with the Caledon one, unfortunately, because there's no tech to understand what the site's demanding, we've had to set it at a safe level that we don't trip the site. And that safe level is 25 kilowatts.
Okay.
So that's where you calculated your 24 on the calculation. Within the next 2 weeks, we'll be putting some tech inside there, and now committing some of my staff to 2 weeks, because, but maybe it's 3 or 4 weeks. But within the next month, there will be tech in at the site that'll be monitoring the site's full usage, and we'll max out the power on the site.
Okay.
So most likely you're going to find in 90% of the cases we can run at the full 60 kilowatts of that charger. Whereas in the other 10%, when the site is under stress, the power machine is on, the coffee machine is on, the hairdryers are on, so everything is drawing power, then we might then have to back down to 24 for 10 minutes, and then it'll push back up again to the full power. So it's going to really make a difference. We've got 4 sites across the country where that will be the improvement that we're going to be doing on those sites. Yeah,
and I suppose that just speaks to the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, early days, this thing's improving Absolutely. All the time.
Yeah. We had to develop that technology, by the way.
Wow.
So it's actually, it's tech we've developed ourselves. We install in our own systems that do it. And then we'll connect into the charging systems, a whole bunch of back-end systems that have changed to cater for that. But absolutely, yeah. So
would there have been a way, now forgive me, I didn't get the GridCars app or log in or anything. We just we got in the cars and we drove, right? So
used your tag.
Yeah, minimal preparation for this trip, which is a good and a bad thing, because it means you can just jump in your electric car and go.
Absolutely.
So that's a good thing. But would we have been able to know in advance that the Caledon system was running lower?
Correct.
Okay.
So if you've got the GridCars app, it's called Charge Pocket. Basically, that would have shown you what the power of that charger is. It'll also show you if it's busy. So if somebody's ahead of you, they're charging, you can see they're charging.
Okay.
We haven't worked out yet to work out how long they're going to be charging. So, but we are looking at some new features to give us an anonymous way to talk to the person. So if you are heading to Caledon and there's somebody there, you can anonymously on the app then say, "Hi, I'm on my way there. How long are you still going to be?" And at least get some sort of idea of where that's going. Over time, we just need lots of chargers in Caledon, then it's not a problem anymore. You'll see, there's 3 of them charging, there's 7 available. I'm fine, I'll stop and get it. So, and that will come, as more operators get into the market, as we look strategically at where do we need to increase density of chargers, that's sort of what will happen.
And that'll all be database decisions, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
You're generating that data all the time.
Correct.
So let's go on to where I suppose it affects South African motorists the most is in their pocket, right? And generally speaking, electric cars are dramatically cheaper to run than traditionally powered cars. And if the fuel price keeps going where it's going, it's just going to get better and better, right, for electric vehicles. But there's a distinction that needs to be made from the fact that when you're charging at home, you're paying home rates, which is quite low. I think in Cape Town it's like R2.10 a unit or R2.30, somewhere there. But then if you go to one of those DC chargers at, say, a Caltex petrol station, am I correct in saying the landlord can set a price for a kilowatt that unit?
The owner of the charge point, which may be the landlord. In our case, we're the landlord and we're the owner, but the landlord might be the Caltex garage.
Okay.
So then it's between us. We'd have a discussion. We try to keep a fixed price across the country. So we've sort of tried to stabilize a single price and keep that across the country and handle the variation underneath that. So where the landlords do have higher prices, we make less margin. Where these lower prices, we make a bit more margin. So the idea is that we try to keep a levelized price. What's probably more important for the viewers, though, or not you call it viewers, it's
viewers and listeners. Yeah.
I think the more important thing is let's look at the big numbers. So at the top level, and it's about half the price of driving with petrol, even on the public charging stations.
Okay.
When you go to a home charging scenario, 5 times cheaper than petrol, 10 times cheaper than petrol, depending on how you drive. Electric vehicles are a lot more susceptible to the driver. And I know a lot of drivers don't like to hear that because they'll come and say, but the car was supposed to get 400 kilometers and I only got 300. You say, well, it depends on the driver. We're not saying you're a bad driver. We're just saying that you're not efficient in terms of electric driving. And the idea is that it really is a lot cheaper on the home type rates, and especially if you put in things like solar. So we find many of our users or customers are installing solar at home. And then you can easily see a tenth of the cost of what it's costing you for petrol. And that really makes a big difference.
Yeah, funnily enough, one of the founders of Cars.co.za actually took his house off the grid and put in the infrastructure to charge an electric car off the sun. I mean, that's the dream.
Absolutely.
So just to go back to that, what is that cost for a public kilowatt hour?
So if you look per kilowatt hour, it's R5.88 is the GridCars one. So that there's no, as I say, there is no predetermined price. So anybody is entitled to charge what they like. So you're going to find that at a particular mall, they might look and make it free. So for example, if you're charging, there are ACs, but if you're charging here at the waterfront in Cape Town, it's all free charging.
Yes, yeah.
And we're going to see that type of model happening where people are saying, well, it's worth more for me to have the customer come here, so I'll happily carry the cost of the charging for him. We've seen voucher-based ones where somebody would say, if you come and charge here, we'll give you a voucher for a certain amount of money, or we'll give you a voucher to spend in the property. There's more and more, I don't want to say tricks, but incentives that people are putting around to say, let's shape the way people are charging and where they're charging. And I think that's going to become an interesting overall business strategy, is looking at the shaping of people's charging habits. One of the big things people that would want to shape that is people like Eskom. So they would want to push you to charge less in the peak times and more in the lean times of power. So not between 5 and 7, but happily between 11 and 4.
Yeah.
In the evening. So they could use incentives to drive that part of the business, to look and move people's charging habits into those times. Okay.
I like to try help our audience, our Cars.co.za audience, understand the cost of motoring with EV versus ICE in terms of how much it costs you to travel 100 kilometers, right? So your electric car will tell you your consumption per 100. Let's take the iX, for example. During my testing, I was achieving 22 or 23. So 23 kilowatt hours, you multiply that by your home cost of electricity, let's say that's 2 Rand. That's 56 Rand to go 100 Ks.
100 Ks, yeah.
Now, if you compare a SUV of comparable size, power, and luxury, you're looking at like, I don't know, a big X5, a big Range Rover, a big Mercedes-Benz, something like that. Let's say those are averaging, for argument's sake, 10 to the 100. Petrol is 21 odd Rand. So those 10 liters cost you 210, 220 Rand. So it's 56 Rand, charge at home, and then 220 Rand to do the same one distance.
But I'm impressed your maths is coming on. I'm pleased to be contributing towards your sort of back of the cigarette box mathematics skills.
Yeah. Now, of course, that then of course means that if you're charging at 5 Rand 88, obviously the costs still go up, but it's still significantly cheaper than buying petrol.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's more stable. So electric, yes, they might go up every year, but they're predictable. We hear the negotiation for months before between Eskom and NASA, and now we know we've got a 15% increase or a 5% increase. So it's a stable increase in where those prices go, whereas petrol is not.
Yes,
it's completely out. You've got no control over it. So, and I think that makes a big difference to businesses. You plan for your Christmas holiday and you say it's going to cost me 2,000 Rand for my drive-in. If you get petrol and you say it's going to cost me 4.5, and then suddenly, Ukraine and Russia go to war, and it doubles the price overnight, or 50% increase.
Yeah. So, I mean, look at what diesel's doing. Gosh, that's quite scary at the moment, Sham. And I can see Ditto wincing because he bought a Hilux with an extended range tank. And just swallow his salary, I think. No, it's going to be. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better as well. But let's just chat a bit about wider EV adoption in South Africa. In fact, let me actually go back one step, because while we're talking about home charging, this is an argument that I use, and I wonder if you agree with me. That when people bring up the E word, right, the dreaded E word, Eskom, as I understand it, there is actually plenty of power in the grid overnight when everyone's sleeping, and most electric cars are charged at home overnight. So in your opinion, do we actually have a capacity problem in this country?
So I'd love to be an Eskom, or to have more knowledge of what Eskom really is thinking and what they are. I think the biggest challenge that we see from the electric vehicle space, and that is not the overall availability of energy. Because if I take my house might get load shedded, my charging might stop when there's load shedding, but there's plenty of hours in order to charge. And my typical daily commute might mean I need 2.5 hours of charging time. I'm plugged in for 12 hours at home. I'm going to get my 2.5.
Yes.
So it doesn't really impact the use of an electric vehicle. Where we do see some of the challenges that we faced in developing the network, and that is really having the right amount of power at certain places. So, for example, we've got a charger at Muscle Bay, 150 kilowatt charger. You spoke about it. I looked at 5 other sites before we chose that particular one. And we picked 6 sites. We evaluated all of them, and that mall was one of them. And the mall was the only one left after looking at the others. They did not have enough power. So they didn't have enough power, not energy, the physical power. So because if you take a typical filling station, they might have 150 amp connection. We need a 300 amp connection for one charger. So you need to have a lot of spare capacity, and or you've got to be at a place where there's just a lot of power. Big malls typically have a lot more power. The Langenburg Mall, they've got great solar. There's a whole bunch of other things that make it even more feasible, and so you can quite happily say when you're charging there, you're charging on solar. So it's even
that's very
environmental.
Cool. Yeah. And that is a big bonus of electric cars, is the way we power our cars. Yes, it's a bit dirty at the moment given South Africa's energy mixture, but it's only going to get better. That is the ambition from everyone in the industry, whereas it'll never get cleaner to power a petrol car. For sure. It is what it is.
Yeah. So we need to look at better generation capacity in certain areas. I think solar is a big help into that. if you look at it, if every car became electric overnight, how much energy would Eskom have to produce? How much more energy? And I've heard numbers anywhere from 10% to 10 times. The real number is maybe between 8 and 12%.
Wow.
Now, if you take the growth of electric vehicles in the fleet, optimistically, we think in 10 years, in fact, optimistically, we're probably even more, because the fleet itself will retain petrol vehicles for a lot longer, for maybe 30 years, 40 years. So the transition is relatively slow. So all we've got to do is produce 10% more power over the next 15, 20 years. That doesn't sound very, very difficult to do. Now, I know it's saying in a time where we are seeing challenges with Eskom and load shedding and things like that, but at the same time, we've got to be on that type of growth path anyway. It's not like we need Eskom to be 10 times bigger. We've just got to get 10% more, and we can cater for all of that. And that then also means you're freeing up a whole bunch of electricity that would have been used in oil refineries and all these other spaces that can build on those networks. So there's so many things that come together in this. I'm not a big driver of saying we've got massive problems. Yes, we've got challenges and we've got to face them. We've got to fix them. We've got to deal with those things. But they're not insurmountable. That means we shouldn't be driving electric vehicles. The electric vehicles will be part of the solution. They will not make the problem worse.
You know what I noticed? I mean, our YouTube channel gets thousands of comments a month, and I engage a lot on social media. And when we published a video about an electric vehicle a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the sentiment was, this is never going to work in South Africa. Straight up. There was very few voices saying this is exciting. Then petrol went through the very psychological 20 rand to the litre. All of a sudden, it went from electric cars will never work to when are cheaper electric cars coming to South Africa?
Yeah.
That's what everyone's questions became.
Yeah.
And I mean, on a personal level, my uncle is a big petrol head, and he phones me as soon as petrol hit 20 rand. He phones me, he says, I need to buy an electric car. I've got 700,000 rand. What can I buy? Yeah. I'm like, right now, options are actually quite limited. There's the Mini and the i3 pretty much in that price bracket. So he says, I don't like either of those. I need a bigger car. So I said, okay, you're going to have to wait. So, and maybe that's something worth chatting about. I'm not sure if you have insights or not into it, but I know the manufacturers are lobbying quite hard to get rid of that extra tax on electric vehicles at the moment. Is it looking promising, do you think?
I haven't kept up with it.
Yeah.
I know about a couple of months ago, I had a discussion with the guys from NAMSA, and I think there's movement. I'm not sure. It's a 7%. I mean, at the end of the day, it's something that just should be levelized. And that'll make a 7% difference. Whether we're going to get into discussions of should it be incentivized, should we make the taxes lower, but that's a different discussion in my opinion. I think that we're getting to the point where electric vehicles will anyway be breaking even with fossil fuel vehicles. If you look at the new Volvo, and I think
the Recharge, the XC40.
The XC40s. I think the petrol version is just over 900, the electric version 1.2. There's a whole bunch of other features you get with the electric version, like free insurance for 2 years. And when you start tallying them up, it pretty much looks as though they cost the same, with very, very small margins. And I think we're going to see that more and more now, where your petrol equivalent vehicle to an electric one will be the same price. Will the really low-end, cheaper vehicles start to come into the market? I really hope so. I hope we start to see very entry-level electric vehicles. I think we're going to see the sort of 500 level quite soon. Maybe 3 months, maybe
that would be nice.
Maybe a year.
Okay.
I think we'll see a few brands coming in at that or targeting that price bracket. So let's say the 400 to 600, 700,000. Below that level, I don't know if there are many cars below that level anyway. But
car prices are crazy at the moment. Yeah.
But I think they will. Definitely within the next few years, we'll start to see the entry-level vehicles becoming electric, without a doubt.
I think my gut feel is the Chinese are coming. They seem to have got pricing and size of battery and range, they that sort of matrix, they seem to be getting it more right than everyone else. That's not to say that there's not some good cars out there. I mean, my dream little electric is a Honda E. I love that thing. I wish I could buy one in South Africa, and that would be my dream commuter car. The iX, I was lucky enough to spend 4 weeks with it. And I learned so much in that time. I charged twice in 4 weeks. I did about...
You weren't driving nearly enough.
I did about 1,000 Ks actually in those 4 weeks. So about...
Nearly enough.
No, 1,000... Is that right? I did about 250 a week roughly. And what I loved about that car was the range was so good, I forgot about it. I didn't even think about it, and that also negates the load shedding argument, because if you only need to charge every 2 weeks, you're definitely going to find some time in amongst the load shedding schedule to charge every 2 weeks. The iX for me was a tipping point. It really was. I, for the first time, felt that this is it. These cars are now better, as good, if not better, than ICE cars. But 2.2 million rand, right? So totally out of the reach of the majority of South Africans. I wish I could drop 2.2 million on a vehicle. I'd have an iX already. But when we start getting affordable, do you feel that we are going to be able to ramp up the installation and availability of charging stations with the adoption of electric vehicles in South Africa?
That's going to be very interesting. So yes, right now I think we're well ahead of where the manufacturers are. If you look at the metric that gets used internationally, sort of number of cars per charging station. And in South Africa, we were 4 a couple of months ago. We may be 5 now. So we're 5 cars for each charging station that's installed. The world average is more like 20. Okay. So we're well ahead.
That's good.
We're really looking good. But you've got how many motor dealerships in this country?
Oh, I don't know. That work thousands? With us, a good few thousand,
So there's thousands of dealers that can push product from 50-odd manufacturers. And once all of those start to really realize where electric is going, and once the demand from the customers get big, then I think having 5 or 10 network development companies we're going to lose that battle. So I think strategically and this is I think a big part of what GridCars has been trying to do is really, maybe I'm putting it slightly differently. I met with somebody this morning and they want to look at developing a network, and he said, well, why would we as GridCars help him? So I said, well, of course we'd help you. He said, no, but wouldn't we be competing with each other? So I said, well, really, we probably need 50 companies, and right now there's 4 or 5. It's really important for us that we get more, because if we don't, it'll be seen as we're failing.
I see.
So it is important for us to grow that market. 5 or 10 years from now, maybe we are going to compete with each other. But I think right now, we've got to be working together to build this industry and ensure that the network gets out there, and that it gets out there in a clever way. You don't want every network operator installing a charger, in Cape Town and in Sandton, because those are the 2 popular areas. You want people to start thinking about coverage, expanding the network, getting that we can drive everywhere with our electric cars, that there's every little town has got a charging station, that every route has got charging stations on them, and that we can start to build that level of coverage across the country. And that, to me, is strategic. And we can only do that if we work together as a collective to drive that and to ensure that we can grow a bit now, that when these big growths happen from the OEMs and as they start selling, because they've got a much bigger sales footprint than what we've got, that the network development companies are ready to scale up and step into that as well. So I think that's where it's going to go.
So at the moment, what's interest like from the private sector and the public sector from a GridCars perspective?
Not much from the public sector. I think Cape Town is the exception. Maybe next couple of months you'll get to know more about that. So we are hearing some really good things coming out of the Western Cape government. I know Johannesburg has also got some interesting discussions happening. Not sure where that will lead to and what we'll see there. On the private side, definitely a lot of interest. I think your traditional fuel companies are all looking at it. The OEMs to agree, but I think more just as a kickstart to get it going. Property companies are starting to look into these things. Franchises are starting to look. I think everybody's starting to see, how does this impact us? You guys did it quite a few years ago to put a charger at your office. And I think we're seeing more of that now, where people are looking and saying, we've got 20 offices across the country. Let's get ACs in at them. We've seen a couple of more progressive ones that are looking and saying, well, we're going to move towards this. Let's get some DCs in now. Let's get it going. Let's start to move that. So I think definitely a lot more excitement in the last 6 months. I would say as much excitement in the last 6 months as in the last 4 years. So,
and I think the manufacturer's role to play will be to bring exciting product that captures the imagination of South Africans. Yes. Something like this i4, which has arrived. The Audi products are very exciting, the RS e-tron and that sort of thing. Yeah. In fact, I'm hoping at Simola next year that they bring an RS e-tron and there's a bit of a battle, because that thing is quick. Yeah. So do you foresee a future where a South African motorist pulls into a Shell, a Total, an Engine, a BP, whatever the case may be, and there's a couple of electric chargers there?
Absolutely. I think not very far away. I mean, now it's normally one charger.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them are starting to formulate their own strategies. So that'll be right now it might be a GridCars or a OEM branded charger at the filling station. But I think we're going to start to see, you're going to go into one of these big franchises and there'll be 3 of their branded chargers standing there. Not necessarily
that's very cool.
A third party, is that it's actually the order. I'm excited about seeing a fuel company, and I don't want to name one because there's so many, that brands charging stations in the malls. You walk into the waterfront and there's a line of chargers all from a particular fuel company. That we start to see these entities as energy companies. And a lot of them, people like Total have rebranded themselves. Total Energies. And they do actually see themselves as energy companies. I remember talking to somebody from Sasol about 5 years ago with the Solar Challenge. And the guy said, remember, we're an energy company. We're not a fuel company. We're actually more petrochemical. But the point is, they're not just about petrol. They're generally about fuel and about delivering those services to customers. And I think we'll see that more when it comes to charging, because you need more services.
Well, I suppose it boils down to a pretty simple business case, right? If you sell petrol, and increasingly people don't need petrol, you got to sell something else. You don't want the guy in the EV to drive past your station because you can't help him, right?
Correct.
And there's a profit center there because you're buying a kilowatt at X from the government and you're selling it on at Y.
Yeah.
So you can make some money. You can make some money because you overcharge the poor guy for bread and milk when he goes into your shop, and 30 Rand for a lunch bar and all the rest of it. So I mean, it makes pretty good business sense to install
Absolutely.
Chargers.
One of the discussions I've had recently was around, will charging systems compete with each other? And I think it's not so much about that. It's going to be about the services competing. So I'm going to choose where I stop, not because of the charger that's there, although maybe in the future somebody does look and say, but this brand of charger is more reliable. Or I prefer this brand of charger because it's faster, or it's got a higher amp connector on it, and therefore it will charge faster on my car. But I think a lot of it is, I want to go here because there's a Wimpy there.
Yes.
Or I want to go there because they have Seattle coffee.
Well, that's why we stopped. Sort of things. We stopped because of the Wimpy.
Yeah. And I think, for me, so we have quite a few that are at sites where there are Seattle coffees, and those are always the good ones as well. You know, to pop in and go and grab your coffee. And I think we'll see more of those sort of things to say, I've got a 15-minute stop. Actually, this is why I'm stopping. This is what they've got. There's maybe it's even like down to it's a putt stall, and I enjoy stopping there because they've got really nice things to browse. And I want to get some mohair jerseys
beanies,
or something.
Yeah,
exactly.
And some good homemade biltong.
There you go.
What advice would you have to South Africans to start preparing and perhaps taking on the challenge of educating yourself as a motorist or as a future motorist in this electric future we're going into? What's the approach? Where are the resources to start understanding, to try and get to your level of understanding? Because I feel like I'm talking to the Yoda of electricity here. But yeah, I mean, obviously online there's tons of YouTube videos and all the rest of it, but in a more South African context.
Sure. I would have said go online. There's just so much material, and there's nothing really different from what we're doing to anybody else. We've got to deal with the load shedding things and stuff, which are more managing of those perceptions for people. And there, I think there are quite a few videos online. This one will be online soon.
Yes.
And you can hopefully help to debunk some of those things.
Yeah.
There certainly are people that understand this. I understand where it's connected into charging directly, but there's plenty of people who really do understand how it'll impact our grid, where those things will be going, and so I think the conferences, there's plenty of conferences that have been done, and they normally have their things out there. There's some really good stuff if you want to listen to Gideon from the Golden Arrow down here in Cape Town. He's done some really good work around what's going to happen in the commercial side of things with buses. So I think the people are starting to get that content out. And, we encourage the experts, go out, get it out, put it out, start to put it into the public domain that people can talk about it and question it and get a better understanding of those things. But I think the biggest thing is you've got to make a decision when, is your next car electric or not? And if it is, maybe you have to delay the purchase of your next fossil fuel vehicle by a few years to rather purchase an electric one. I like the idea that we've got to start putting pressure on the manufacturers. So, if I walk into a car dealership and I walk up to the cheaper car and I look and I say, oh, this is a good car. It's perfect for me and my family. I'd love to get it. Does it come in electric? And then, no. So, okay, well then I have to go and look for a manufacturer who does have one in electric, and I walk out.
Yeah.
And I think it's that's going to start to build the interest where the OEMs would put pressure, because the dealers can put pressure on the brand to bring vehicles. There's many vehicles that are not in this country that are on the cheaper end and the cheaper scale. Smart has got cars.
Renault Zoe, nice little car.
Absolutely. So we need to find ways of applying that pressure to those OEMs so that they can start to say, all right, there is a market. Let's get some vehicles in. Let's start to test this market. Let's start to play at that level.
Gosh, Winston, I genuinely feel like we could probably talk for about the next 3 hours. I have so much to ask you about. I know you're excited about Formula E coming here.
Oh, yes.
I'm super excited.
Formula E for me is special. It's because I had the opportunity, without elaborating too far, of working with the FIA right at the beginning of Formula E. Before it was Formula E, it was called Formulec in the beginning. So Formula Electric. And so I've seen it growing from there. And I've been, since that was sort of 2010, I've been wanting to get Formula E to South Africa. So the fact that they're actually now coming is so exciting. And I think, I've got a chat tonight with one of the guys from there, and we're carving the right sort of role for how do we work with them, how do we help to convey that message and get it out. So it's going to be exciting. Absolutely.
So if you're listening or watching and you missed the announcement, March 2023, I believe, Cape Town Street Circuit. It is coming. It's happening. Yes. It's on the calendar. It's already
just
gone out.
waiting for ratification, which is now in June, if I remember this correctly.
Okay. Well, fingers crossed, everyone, that all the paperwork goes through. But I know the city's keen. I know Alan Windy and Jordan Hill-Lewis on board, the Premier and the Mayor. I was very lucky to actually MC the launch of that track, which was very exciting. And then I just went to Monaco to actually watch Formula E, and I had a great time. Absolutely. I had a really great time. Yeah. So I'm excited about Formula E.
Yeah. I saw the first Monaco Formula E. My wife and I were over there. It was phenomenal to see it.
That's cool. But it's an exciting form of motorsport, and also I think an important one, because more car manufacturers partake in Formula E than any other racing series in the world. Yeah. So,
and you know what I think it is that the other forms of racing the vehicles have become so specialized. They're racing vehicles. They're no longer the car that you and I can drive. Whereas Formula E, while the car looks like the technology is still different, the tech inside of those cars is pretty much the tech inside of the cars we've got today. So, and I think based on that, it's exciting, because it's not these super powerful electric motors that are, let's say, megawatts of power. 200 kilowatt power. They're the same power that's, in fact, half the power of the car you were driving.
Next year, actually, they're going to be quite potent, but still less power, actually, than I drove. Yeah, but lighter,
Absolutely. Yeah. And more designed as a race vehicle. But the idea is that and I think this is why the OEMs are excited, because they can see the research happening on those vehicles and translating that into the normal cars. Whereas I think Formula One lost that to a large degree. I think they've got it back over the last few years with the hybrids. But, take 10 years back or 15 years back, when they were running at 28,000 RPM, they were using statistical physics to calculate the position of the piston, and not mathematics, So
wow.
Which was ridiculous.
That's phenomenal. Yeah. Another point, I got to meet Tommaso, I forget his surname, but he runs Nissan's Formula E team. I was a guest of Nissan over there, and the one thing he said, which was quite interesting, was the technology goes both ways. So the manufacturers sometimes bring in know-how, but then obviously with it being such a hotbed of R&D, the learnings go to road cars. That was super interesting. He was a really great guy to chat to, very knowledgeable. Maybe if you cross paths with him, I mean, he'll be out here next year. I thought Formula E, when I saw it in its current guise, I thought it had a great future, and I'm so excited that South Africa's going to be part of it. A million things I want to ask you, but I think we've been going on for quite a while, and maybe we're torturing our viewers' data stores. But let's perhaps leave it at that. I think we're going to have you back here.
I'd be very, very happy to.
Million things I want to chat about.
But maybe we can challenge the viewers and listeners to come up with some real hardcore questions that say these are the things that we're worried about. And
that is a great idea.
Look at addressing those.
That's a great idea.
More than just debunking. Let's debunk for South Africa. Not for the world.
Well, what usually happens with these podcasts, we put them on our channel, on our YouTube channel, and on all the podcasting platforms, and the engagement's great, and people really engage, and loads of questions and comments and opinions come through. So if you're in town again, we'll get through those.
And I'll jump onto the channels as well and do some replies and see if we can answer some questions.
You're very welcome.
On the fly
for my real core focus, what I wanted to get across today, and I think we've done it, we've really nailed it, is the idea of how to and can you road trip in an electric car in South Africa at the moment. And I just wanted to say kudos to you and GridCars, because I know how much work has gone in and how passionate you guys are about electrifying South Africa's road network. I'm very excited about it. As you can see outside the window here, we've got a couple of old-fashioned dinosaur juice burners. But and as much as I love them, I'm very excited about electric cars. And I know you are too.
Yeah.
So thank you very, very much for being here. And if you're watching or listening, you'll find in the description below links to, we had an interview with Sasha Sawyer, the MD of Audi. We were chatting a lot about electric cars. An interview with a very good friend of mine, Alex Parker, about how electric cars might work in South Africa. So you'll find those links as well, and then links to our reviews of some electric cars that we've driven. We'll be filming the i4 soon, I promise. I know a lot of you have been asking. It got taken away for us for marketing purposes as soon as we brought it back to Cape Town, but it's coming back and we're going to film it. So Winston, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I think, we're out there, we're ready. Got any questions? Fire them off. Let's go. I think exciting times.
Are you present on social media yourself?
Yes, definitely.
So can we put your social in the description?
We can do that, yeah.
Cool. And then you can reach out to Winston directly. And thank you very much to our dear Cars.co.za community for listening and watching. Be safe, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Now, did you know that Cars.co.za has a brilliant app? It's actually one of the most popular apps in South Africa, and that's because it's actually really bloody good to use. You can save your favorites. So while you're shopping, if you're taking a couple of weeks to shop, you just save your favorites so you don't lose them. And it's also a brilliant way of finding new car specs and pricing. It's incredibly detailed. I use it all the time. The link to the app is in the description below. You can get it on iOS and Android, and it's in the Huawei app gallery, I think it's called. Yes, that is what it's called. Cool. Alrighty. And I'm done. Good. Okay.
Cars.co.za.